John Lynch spoke to the media today and did not disappoint, giving several points of great news for the San Francisco 49ers in my perspective. I can't wait to get to that in this video. I've got 3 big things that he said, plus a bunch of other smaller details that I think are kind of huge in their own right, but we're going to be breaking this down, not just today, but I'm sure there's going to be other days coming up where we're going to be talking about this and whatever Jed York ends up saying and all of that good stuff. So hit subscribe if you're looking for daily 49ers content. Appreciate you for helping me get to 10,000 subscribers before the draft. That was my goal, and I massively hit it way earlier than expected because of you. So I wanted to thank you so much. We are going to be having a 10K giveaway coming up in the next few videos. Once I get everything all sorted out and figure out the legal stuff and everything, we have a 10K giveaway coming your way. So stay tuned for that. Hit subscribe if you want to be a part of that 10K giveaway. But Brock Purdy contract negotiations are one of the first big things that came out of the conversation with the media today from General Manager John Lynch. Here's the kind of just to kick us off here. John Lynch states that he would like to get Brock Purdy's contract extension done before the offseason program, really talking about OTAs, okay? So John Lynch's intention is to make sure, the goal is to get this contract done before OTAs. I don't think we learned anything new in hearing that. It is always nice, in my opinion, to hear the general manager reassure us of that. That's always good. But here's a quote from what he said. Brock wants to be with us. We want Brock to be with us. When that's the case, these things get done. Hopefully it happens really soon this offseason. I think we're going to get the deal done. This is via David Lombardi. But we keep going. General Manager John Lynch, per Nick Wagner, asked whether it was realistic to expect Brock Purdy to play for $5 million this season if a deal does not get done, which would be what his final year of his rookie contract, what he would make. I think we're going to get the deal done. That's what I believe. Pause. Think about this for a second. What John Lynch could have said is Brock Purdy is a member of the 49ers, and we've heard him say this about other players, basically, in different words, in different situations. Brock Purdy is a player, and he's under contract for the 49ers. We expect him to play. That's the kind of language. Now, granted, that's the kind of language you hear in August, right? That's the kind of language you hear in July when guys don't show up to training camp. But still, he could have said something like that. He didn't say something like that. But here's what he did say. Lynch says, it's not too optimistic to think that a deal with Purdy could be done by the start of offseason program in a couple of weeks. As in, that's a possibility, though by no means a guarantee, which is another thing that he said. So coming from John Lynch himself, from the general manager, saying he's feeling optimistic. It's not too optimistic to believe this thing could get done in the next couple of weeks. I think that's good news. That's a better situation than it could have been. And I would just want to underscore again for you guys, as we've talked about before, the difference between how the negotiations with Brock Purdy have gone from a public point of view, from what we get to see, how different it's gone compared to so many players in the last 5 years. Whether that was Deebo Samuel or Nick Bosa or Brandon Aiyuk most recently, like these guys getting these contracts done, it gets nasty, it gets ugly. There are things that don't work out the way you want them to, and there's a lot of back and forth. And when you do hear from the general manager or from your head coach or from ownership, things feel a little bit shaky in the way that they talk about it. And we want it to get done, This feels different to me. Maybe it's just my gut. Maybe it's my bias. I don't know. You can let me know in the comments if you disagree, but I'm hyped on it. I am. John Lynch. We've been a top 5 spending team. Our ownership has been tremendous. They've given us every resource that we need, and that's not stopping. We're going to continue to be aggressive. At the end of this offseason, I would surmise that we're going to be a top 5 spending team again. There's 2 things you can take from that. David Lombardi seems to believe his perspective, okay, this is his opinion, is that this means that Brock Purdy's first year of his contract is gonna eat up some of that guarantee. At least that's how it sounds to me based on reading his article. I didn't sit down and I didn't talk to him, all right? So maybe I'm misunderstanding, but what it seemed to me is that David Lombardi's perception of that is that there's a bigger hit to the first year that they're trying to get kind of ahead of, let's say, because in the way they're handling all the other contracts and getting all this dead money in now. So that's a possibility that Brock Purdy is going to get paid more like what he's worth this season, instead of having everything be pushed off. That will allow them to push off less in the future. And so you take this tough year, but then all the upcoming years plus void years, things look a lot better. That is a really interesting take. The other way you could take this, based on the quote, and I wasn't there, David Lombardi was there, so I'm going to trust that he's probably more right than I am. But the way I read this, when I first read it, my first thought was like, are there other moves going on, like extensions this offseason, that are going to impact some of that? That being said, we know the 49ers historically, when they do these extensions, they do them in a way that helps them for the current cap hits. So we'll have to wait and see how this plays out, but I think this is a good sign. Let's move on to Brandon Aiyuk. So John Lynch on Brandon Aiyuk's recovery from his ACL, MCL injury is the news that we're not surprised to hear, but it is great to hear it from the general manager. Again, this is coming from John Lynch. When you see a report out there, even a Schefter report, guys, it's different than when it comes from the general manager himself, because now we're at the source. So I'm stoked about this, hearing this he went down there to Dr. Neil Elatrash this weekend. I'm not going to get into timelines and all that, but he did very well. We are pleased with Brandon's progress. He has been working hard and has gotten good reviews from Dr. Elatrash. So the cool thing here, right, again, we knew that this was kind of rumored from Adam Schefter, and pretty much anything from Adam Schefter is pretty solid, but it's always nice to hear it from the general manager himself. He did talk about BA and the trade rumors that have been going on for the last couple of weeks, saying there's probably spillover from last year when we're going through his contract and a number of teams being interested in Brandon. You always take calls from folks, but we've always been interested in Brandon being a part of the Niners. We made the decision that when we signed him, it's good to hear that he's tracking well with his progress. He's working really hard to do so, and I expect fully that Aiyuk will be a part of us moving forward. Now, obviously, in here, there's a lot that we could break down, but the surface level aspects, right? One, he's not getting traded. It is, as I'm recording this, March 31st, 8 o'clock Mountain Time, so 7 o'clock for most of you over on the West Coast. And at this point, I would not imagine a trade is going to be done before this new money ends up being vested, right? Now, that being said, there's other stuff here that I think is really interesting about Brandon Aiyuk, talking about that he's tracking well with his progress. That's good. Yeah, we made that decision when we signed him. I thought was another interesting statement in a good way, not like a surprising statement, but something that, again, you want to hear your general manager really believes in this kid and wants him to be on your football team going forward. And I will just say, like I've said it a million times, if you go to 2023, we don't know if we're going to get 2023 Aiyuk again, but if we get 2023 Aiyuk again, even if it's not this season, then it's a good contract. That's how I feel. I genuinely feel like if we get that kind of production out of him again, even if it's 2026, that's a good contract for us, I think. It's a lot of money, and the 49ers were definitely open to moving on from it. There were more than enough reports to suggest the 49ers were more than willing to move on for the right price. But the fact that he's going to be a Niner, the fact that teams weren't willing to take a risk on him, is all completely understandable. And from the inside, from John Lynch's perspective, I think this is good. This is a good spot. Now, John Lynch talked about the offensive line, and this I found fascinating. There's a lot here. And some of this, I'm going to be honest, this is why I said double dose of good news and not triple, because some of you are not going to think this is good news, and I respect your opinion on this. Let's start with the bad and go from there, okay? As reported by David Lombardi, John Lynch said, we were 6-11. No matter how we got there, that's embarrassing. I don't ever want to be 6-11 again. The draft is an important part of fixing that. Okay, what kind of drafting are we talking about, Mr. Lynch? Related to the offensive line, this is what John Lynch said, as reported by NBC Sports Bay Area. We'll try to improve our offensive line through the draft, but there are a lot of good pieces there already. We like our right tackle. Some of you are not going to like that sentence. We like Colton McKivitz. We like our center. Some of you are definitely, I don't think any of us are going to like that sentence. Unless maybe they're talking about Matt Hennessy. I don't know. We'll see. For left guard, we have some candidates in-house right now. Okay. But we'll look to add in the draft, certainly. That's something where I don't follow the social media narrative on how our guys are. We evaluate our players, and we think we have a pretty steady group. Now, I'm going to agree with John Lynch in principle on the idea that they have some pieces already figured out on the offensive line. I'm interested in, I didn't listen to the entire thing yet, so maybe when it all comes out and I'll be able to get more from it, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. So far, I've only seen text, and there is a pretty good, solid piece from David Lombardi kind of covering as much of that John Lynch, all the different things that he said as you can. So there might be more there that we can get into in future videos. But I think in general, I agree in principle. The thing I'm scared of is like, if Jake Brendel plays the way he played this season and he's your starting center and he plays this way again, then we have some serious issues. Now, coaches know what we don't. Right? There are things that are different about what they're trying to do. There are, you never know like what kind of little scheme additions and things they're trying to do because it's Jordan Mason and not Christian McCaffrey. And maybe there's an explanation out there for the lack of great footballing ability that we've seen this last season out of Jake Brendel, who was rated at the very bottom of the league pretty much every week in terms of center play. But I would like to see some improvement there. I'd like to see if it's the same as we saw last season, I'm going to be disappointed. Okay. Once free agency passed, this is from Coach Yak here. Once free agency passed, we knew it was either going to be Jake, Hennessy, or a draft pick, which is unlikely due to how important center is in Kyle's system. Nugent isn't a big guy and probably would have the same issues as Jake against the stout lineman. I'm praying that they give Hennessy a legitimate shot with the ones. Even then, he would have to be head and shoulders up better than Jake for them to make the switch. Basically, get ready for Jake this coming season and possibly next, since he has 2 seasons left on his contract. Effectively, Coach Yak is saying that he believes that Jake Brendel is going to be the starting center. And based on no free agency moves at this position, i.e. Drew Dahlman, it sounds to me like that is probably most likely. So, yes, Jake Brendel needs to step it up. Did not have a great season. Hopefully, there's more to it than that. There's no coaching staff changed on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, yes, technically, you've got Kubiak, as the offensive coordinator, and that kind of changes things, I guess, technically, but not really. So hopefully we see an improvement there. We'll have to wait and see on that. Oh, man. Oh, yeah. There was one more I wanted to get to, and it's on the wrong page, but that's okay. In David Lombardi's full article, his full breakdown, I wanted to just snag this one quote from him here about what John Lynch said about the draft, which is in 24 days, by the way. We still have a lot of Hall of Fame worthy players. There's a tremendous core that we can go be really competitive with and go add some young players to. It will be exciting for our roster and necessary. I think it's a good recipe when you add to our core of established stars with a draft class like we had last year. I think there's a lot of opportunity to infuse youth, and hopefully with youth comes health into our roster. On top of health, I will add one more thing that I was listening to a podcast recently today, and I was just like thinking about as they were talking about maybe the teams in the best position of the draft this year. And every year's a toss-up. It's always a toss-up. But this year, especially because of the lack of quarterback talent, the draft is going to be it's going to be a little messy. There's going to be moves happening. There's going to be players that you'd think should be drafted earlier that are drafted later. There's going to be players that you think should be drafted later that are drafted earlier. Like, the movement's going to be interesting because it's not a quarterback heavy draft. And that is a position that, financially speaking, if you can draft at the quarterback position for your team, there are many teams that need a quarterback, that it has a huge impact long-term in what you're able to do financially. So there's huge value there. And if there's not a huge quarterback heavy draft like last season, things look interesting. Last draft was a good example of how different things can look when there are a ton of quarterbacks that teams are going to be interested in. So the whole point, though, being that with the draft being such a question mark this season and with so much talent, but talent kind of in some ways evenly ranked, in other ways, yes, I get it. We have our first round guys. We have our second round guys. I get that. And that's how it always feels. But the teams are meeting with these guys. They're talking to them. They're going over and over on the tape. The scouting department has put up all these, all of their plans and what they think the 49ers and every given team should do. And the team with the most advantage, the biggest advantage, is the team that has the most picks. That's basically what they said in the podcast, which would be the 49ers and the Ravens are the two teams that have the most picks at 11 picks. So we should feel good about that, because that does mean that the 49ers' chances of hitting are just statistically higher because they have more guys that they're going to be picking up and bringing in and getting in there in the organization, working out with them in off season all the way through training camp. And of course, if a lot of those picks hit, if a bunch of them hit and the right ones hit, then the 49ers are in a very, very good position. If they don't, could be another rough season. I don't think a 6-11 season. I'm more optimistic than that, but it could be a rough season. We'll have to wait and see. Let me know in the comments what you think. As always, appreciate you guys, and make sure you come back for more, because we do have that 10K giveaway coming up in the next few days once I get everything all sorted out.